In this class, we look at the different activities that go into planning out your research and writing your Unit 3 research paper. We have a brief reflective writing activity. I have some additional tips on searching for research papers on the Academic Search Premier, and finally the in-class discussion. The research planning is the most important piece of lecture in Unit 3. You can refer to the Penguin Handbook where there are more notes. The detailed class lecture also has a lot of examples. The first thing in writing a research paper is obviously identifying a key topic. And you do a feasibility and relevance check. Ideally, you select 3 to 4 research topics and then do a feasibility and relevance check on them. And based on your findings, you select a topic that you think is the most conducive to a Unit 3 research paper. Topics which pass both the feasibility and the relevance check are the ones that you use for writing your research paper around. We completed this last week. In case you already haven't finished this, I'd strongly advise that you first finish this before moving on to the next stage. After you've identified a key topic that you want to write your paper around, the next step is to identify the purpose of your paper. When I say purpose, the things that you identify include is your paper meant to do analysis? Analysis is typically done if you have an issue and you're taking a stance on the issue and you want to convince readers that your stance is the right one. That's when you do analysis form of a purpose. So for example, if I want to convince readers that women's rights in corporate America are not as transparent as they should be, then that's an issue, and I will use analysis to convince my readers that what I'm saying is right. Analysis can be done using academic research papers, which you take from the library database, the Academic Search Premier. They can also be done using expert opinions, which you may collect as part of interviews or field research. But basically, you take a certain stance, and then you analyze your stance and prove it with existing research. So, like you notice now, the purpose of your paper decides the way you structure your paper. So with the analysis type of paper, you have you're taking a given stance, and then you're supporting the stance. You're maybe taking the opposite stance and refuting it. So if someone claims, well, women's rights are transparent, you take that stance and then you refute it. So that's the analysis approach for the purpose of the paper. Review is where you don't want to take a stance, but you want to review existing material and present both sides of an argument to the reader, and then maybe let them take their own let them make their own opinion. So if I'm writing a paper on do ghosts exist, I can include the opinions of maybe religious leaders or the opinions of paranormal scientists and say, well, according to these proofs and these expert opinions, ghosts do exist. But you also have the atheist research scholars who say, well, there is no ghost and there is no God. So I can present both opinions and then let readers take their own call. Typically, for analysis, if you have quantifiable proofs, you can use the analysis method. But if you do not have quantifiable proofs and you do not want to take a stance, you can do the review method, where you're presenting opinions on both the sides of an argument, and then you're letting your readers make the judgment call. Survey is where you're researching a topic that's contemporary, and where people who are being affected by the topic are around you, people whom you can access. So for say I'm writing a research paper on the impact of social networking on the American college student. Then I can go and actually interview college students, take a survey, get them to fill out a questionnaire, and then based on my analysis of the questionnaires, come to certain conclusions. So survey should be ideally something that is a contemporary issue that is affecting people around you or people whom you can easily access. Important things with doing the survey is making sure you get the right sample. So if I'm interviewing college students for a paper based on college students, ideally the demographic distribution should be of people who are in the age range of 18 to 22, because typically that's how that's the age group of the American college student. I should have a sufficient sample size. I should have at least say 60 to 75 students who I whom I interview or have them fill the questionnaire, because then that's representative of the American college student as a whole. So those are two important things: your sample size and your sample composition, the sort of people who take your surveys and the number of people who take your survey. Argument is like analysis with a slight difference. With analysis, you are taking a stance, but you're giving some leeway to say, well, the opposite instance of my stance may be true, but this is truer. So you're saying maybe there are a few organizations in which women's rights are transparent, but for the most part, women's rights are not transparent. That's analysis. But with argument, these are just binary cases. There is A or B, both cannot coexist. So for instance, if you're writing a research paper on the 9/11 conspiracy theory, you can either say, well, the conspiracy theory is right, or you can say the conspiracy theory is wrong. You cannot say it's both right and wrong. So when you write a research paper, you can take a stance saying, well, it was a terrorist attack, it was not a government conspiracy. Or you can say it was a government conspiracy and it was not a terrorist attack. So you have to take a firm stance. You cannot allow any leeway. It's not a bad situation that needs to be improved or a situation that needs to be altered. It's an open shut case where only one of two options can exist, and you're taking one of the options. The important thing with the argument approach is you not only have to prove your stance, you also have to refute the other stance. So if you're saying 9/11 was a terrorist attack, you have to prove that it was a terrorist attack. You also have to prove the conspiracy theory is wrong. Once you've identified the purpose of your paper, and that sort of decides your structure and your approach, the next important thing is to identify what sort of a relationship you want to build with your readers. There's recognize, there's revise, and there is response. So recognize is where you want your readers to identify a topic, or maybe there's a topic that's not being discussed as much as it should be, and you want your readers to recognize that this is important. Or maybe your readers are believing in something based on certain assumptions, and you want to give them proof to say, well, those assumptions need to be revised because there is a lot of evidence to prove that those assumptions are not necessarily right. So for instance, if you want to talk about child labor in developed countries, it is a big problem, but maybe your readers don't recognize the fact that it still is a problem. They think it's an obsolete problem. Or the war school issue, a lot of people think war schools don't exist in the West, whereas the video that we saw a few weeks back showed contrary evidence. So you want your readers to just recognize a pattern, a fact, or some piece of information which is not something that's present in their consciousness. Recognize goes very well with analysis, or it also goes well with the review. Sorry, recognize goes well with review, because you're primarily presenting scholarly matter and you're telling them something which they're not consciously aware of. Revise actually goes with analysis, because revise is where you want to provoke thought, where people are thinking about it, but you want to provoke them into thinking about a subject which they're conscious of in a different way. So people are conscious of women's rights in America, but then you want to present a new perspective and say, yes, there are women's rights, but they're not as transparent as they should be in corporate. So you're provoking thought about a subject that's active in their consciousness. You may also want to change people's mindset. You may want, if there is an existing pattern, so a lot of people may be smoking, and if you're a majority of your readers are smoking and you want to tell them smoking is bad, then that's again changing mindset. So these kind of things you use where you're trying to revise the reader's thought process or provoke them into thinking. You use the analysis method, where you prove why what you're saying is valid and why the reader needs to listen to you. Lastly, you have response, where you need to work with existing notions. These are again clear black and white cases where you cannot say, well, both notions are right, but notion A is a little more stronger than notion B. It's related directly to what an argument purpose does. It's an open shut case. So if a majority of your readers would like to believe that, say, euthanasia is bad, it's an existing notion, because most people believe you cannot give mercy killing to someone. A very small percentage believe otherwise. So that's an old notion. If you want to write a pro euthanasia paper, then you need to work with an old notion. So you need to put an argument form of a purpose and say not only is euthanasia right, not giving euthanasia or not giving mercy killing is bad. So you need to present your perspective positively and refute the opposite of your perspective. Once you've done once you've had your purpose and once you've recognized the relationship you want to develop with your readers, that's when you decide what sort of resources you're going to use. So if you want to revise, then obviously you need to present a lot of quantitative proofs. Just expert opinions will not matter. If you just want people to understand, recognize, having expert opinion is sufficient. Response, when you're working with old notions, can be a good mix of maybe field survey, where you say interview people and who are dying and talk about how the last few years were not really productive or not really helpful. So it can be a combination of survey, maybe field research, an actual factual data, quantitative data, and expert analysis. Once you've done these two methods, once you've once you've got your purpose of your paper, and once you've identified what sort of relationship you want to build with your readers, the next is scoping out your research paper. Do you want to do only a literary research or a field research? So will all your resources come from the library database, or will you also go and do a few field surveys? Typically, how many sources do we use is for the purpose of the Unit 3 research paper, we use 3 to 5. At the most, 3 is ideal, 5 is a bit much, but for the rhetorical purposes of the Unit 3 research paper, you use 3 resources. The different stages, of course, the initial proposal is what you've already finished, where you've identified a key topic and you've done the feasibility and relevance check. That's when you're proposing that this is the topic I want to do my research on, and this is why I want to do it. This is something you've already completed. The next you do your research, and you do your research, and then you have the first draft, and with your final draft is revised based on your teacher and peer feedback, just as before. But the one difference is this time you also need a bibliography where you acknowledge the different resources, the 3 to 5 resources that you're using. You acknowledge them in a bibliography. Expected length is about 5 pages. So obviously research is the crux of your research paper. So once you've scoped out, you've decided this is what I'm going to do. The next is to actually do your research. There are 2 stages, pre-search and research. Pre-search is what you do to identify a key topic, or also to identify your central research question. What is your central research question? We'll come to that in a moment. So that's what you use a pre-search for. You can use any search engine or a generic encyclopedia like Wikipedia for your pre-search. The research you do as part of your pre-search will never go into your actual research paper. It is for your own purpose, for you to decide on a topic and to finalize a central research question. The next stage is the actual research, which will be your literary research, where you're getting your resources from the research database on the library, or maybe you're going and doing a field survey. This research will be actually used in your paper. You'll either be citing the resources, or you'll be citing your field survey analysis results. And then you do your first draft, where there needs to be one central big question that is answered. So are women's rights in organizations transparent? Things like that. That's one central question that is going to be answered. Even if you're not taking a stance, so if you're saying, do ghosts exist, is there sufficient evidence to prove both that ghosts exist and that ghosts don't exist? So there is you're providing proofs for 2 exactly opposite perspectives, but then there is that research question, if whether or not there is sufficient proof for both. As you build your research paper, one very important thing is either you're revising old definitions, you're evaluating an existing condition like women's rights and corporates, you're comparing 2 different things, like the 2 different perspectives on the conspiracy theory. You're revising a historical topic, like a lot of people do research, say, on the World War, or you're doing counter objections. So if there is an objection, then that's a counter objection. So the statement is, this is an example, a statement is 9/11 was a terrorist attack. The objection to that is it was not a terrorist attack, it was a government conspiracy. So you do a counter objection to that, saying it is not it is not a government conspiracy because of these reasons. And finally, arguments, where, like I said, you assemble evidence to prove that one of the two options is the only right one. I'd urge you to read this. A lot of detailed examples have been provided in the text-based lecture. I'd really strongly urge you to read it. Even if you're depending only on the YouTube video, I'd urge you to go and read that. This is a small piece of reflective writing. You don't need to submit it this week. You can submit it along with your Unit 3 essay, but it's important that you know the answers to these questions before you start writing your Unit 3 essay. So I would urge you to respond to these questions, but for logistic purposes, submit it along with your Unit 3 essay. One is, what is the key purpose of the topic that you're writing your research paper on, which is what is your central research question, basically. And second is, what sort of relationship do you want to build with your reader? So we saw the different kinds of relationship: recognize, revise, and respond. So what sort of relationship do you want to build with your reader? These are some additional resources. I would strongly urge you to go back to the video on the Academic Search Premier that I shared last week. But along with that, this is an additional method for doing your research on your resources. So once you decide on a topic, go to the Academic Search Premier and enter the two broad terms. The first time you search, do not enter very specific terms. Enter the broad terms. So I said women's right and carpet, and don't put it all in one field. Distribute it across two fields. Look at the top 5 to 6 results when you do your generic search. Don't go through all the results. Just look at the first 5 to 6 results. If there are one or two you can use, fantastic. Keep those one or two resources aside, and then use the rest of the results to refine your question. So what you then need to do is to briefly read the abstract. What is the paper about? And pick up keywords. So I maybe can pick up the word transparency from the abstract of another paper. So read the abstracts of the other results and identify some more keywords. Then use these keywords to perform additional searches. I would say women's right, corporate, and transparency. So then I will get a more specific paper. So what you're doing is you're using a search results. You're using a generic search results to refine the keywords with which you will do the next search. So with search 1, you're using keywords with which you will do search 2. And you follow this iterative process till you have 3 research papers, 3 academic papers that you will cite and use in the research essay that you're writing. If you still have any questions, feel free to write to me. I can help you out a little bit further. Write to me with what your topic is, and I can help you out. Finally, the in-class discussion. This is going to be a peer group based activity. So please read Gender in Video Games, which is under week 7. And you need to respond together, as peers will respond together. It will not be like an individual response. So you need to read the essay and then discuss the essay with your peer and then respond to the following questions. One is, why has Lara Croft's role in the essay been presented in terms of gender? For the second part, each peer group has been given one section of the essay. It's given over here. It's also given under the description of the class discussion. What you need to do is to go work with your peer on this. Go to that section, summarize the gender perspective on it, and research from one more resource on what has been said about the gender perspective. So for instance, if one of the paragraphs says video games portray women in a bad light, look for one more resource which also says the same thing, and quote and give me the name of the resource that you found. The expected length is about a paragraph, 2 paragraphs in all. Sorry, that's not 2 paragraphs, each 2 paragraphs in all. Upload this in the week 7 class 1 discussion.